So good morning, good afternoon, and good night again to those of you now joining us. I'm Wesley Ashton. I'm an associate professor at Illinois Tech at the Stuart School of Business. And today we are sharing an alumni panel on ESG and the future of business. Of course, we can't control for outside sounds, so I hope you guys are not disturbed too much by what seems to be a fire engine going past my window. So in our audience today, we have a mixture of students from the Environmental Management and Sustainability program at the Stuart School. We have some alum and we have folks from the general public, so welcome to you all. So we launched this poll just to get a sense of who's in the audience to see what's your level of familiarity with ESG. And so it looks like as though a little less than half of you are very familiar, have some familiarity, and a few folks are novices and curious. All right, so with that, I will stop sharing and would like to go ahead and get our panel started. So we are thrilled today to have three distinguished alumni from the Environmental Management and Sustainability program at Stuart. And I will introduce them in the order that they graduated. So first up is Liz Fudge, who is a 2013 graduate of the EMS program. She recently accepted a position as the Senior Manager for ESG Strategy and Programs at Trico Braun, a global packaging and design and distribution company. Since her time at Illinois Tech, she has worked on various projects, including an ESG risk assessment for a junior mine in Nevada, a GRI report for an Illinois manufacturer, and a waste characterization project for a Big Ten university. Liz has also worked in solar construction and environmental regulatory assistance for businesses. During her sustainability career, she and her husband raised two teenagers and successfully sent them off to college and into adulthood. She and her husband now live in Reno, Nevada, at the base of the Eastern Sierras. Welcome, Liz. Next up, we have Aaron Morales, who is the head of ESG solutions for the UK, Iberia, and Latin America at S&P Global Sustainable. At S&P, Aaron has worked with corporations and investors across the Americas and Europe, helping them with ESG integration, data, and analytics. Prior to S&P Global, Aaron worked as a business development manager within the ESG data management technology division of UL. Before that, Aaron worked as a sustainability consultant for a boutique firm, helping companies build their sustainability strategy. Aaron also worked at Robert Bosch doing scientific research on fuel cells. He holds a BS in chemical engineering from Tec de Monterrey in Mexico, an MS in environmental management from Illinois Tech and graduated in 2014, and an MBA from Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. And finally, joining us from Kerala in India tonight is Karun Jacob, who is a senior associate at MSc ESG Research based out of Mumbai. He is a member of the Models and R&D team that is responsible for the development and maintenance of the ESG ratings methodology, which captures emerging ESG risks and opportunities. Prior to his current role, Karun has been working in the sustainability industry in the areas of carbon accounting, supply chain transparency, and data analysis. He has formerly worked for corporations such as Tata Technologies, W.W. Granger, and a food sustainability startup called FarmLogix. In 2014, Karun served as a Climate Corps Fellow for USG Corporation in Chicago, which those of you who are familiar with our school is actually across the street from the Stuart School of Business. All right, so it seems as though I'm getting all of the fire engines this morning outside my window. I apologize for that. All right, so to get us started, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to tell us about their current role and what's exciting about their work in this space. So let's go ahead and start with you, Liz, and then move on to Aaron and Karun.
Sure, thanks, Weslyn. Great to be here. I am super excited about my current role. I've been there for a grand total of 2 months, so I'm not sure that I can share a ton with you about what I am doing because I'm really just learning. But like Weslyn said, I'm managing the ESG strategy and programs for Tricor Braun. I'm excited to work with this company because they are starting their journey. They're more on the beginning path. They've been doing a lot of efforts, but really haven't organized it into a really big effort. And my role is the first role that they've hired for in this space. It's been, you know, the efforts have been spearheaded by different leadership positions in the company. So it's super exciting. They are dedicated to creating positive impacts for their people and their communities, working on their environmental footprint. So that's what I am excited about. So yeah, it's brand new.
Am I next? Cool. Hello, everyone. I guess I've been in my role for the last 5.5 years, and I'm actually in the middle of that transition. So I'm actually leaving my current role to join a new company for a new opportunity. But what I can tell you with certainty about what has been really exciting for me for the last 5 years is just seeing the market change. And also my role is certainly at the core of ESG, but it is also a very commercial role. And so it is kind of at the intersection of sales and sustainability and ESG. And one of the things that has been really interesting for me is the exposure that comes with a commercial client-facing role. You just get to talk to everyone and learn and listen and understand what people are thinking about, what challenges they have, and what for me at least, what makes me really passionate about this whole industry is the fact that we all play a role, right? So even if it's just as a salesperson or someone in product or someone that works in marketing, everyone is playing a role in the ESG ecosystem in helping advance the agenda. And for us, and for the things we do, whether it's helping companies with measuring, understanding something, answering a specific business question. It's really that's what got me up from bed every morning, is just going out to market and talking to lots of different companies from all over the world. And I'm talking about corporates, banks, investment managers, insurance companies, governments, development banks, and everyone's really trying to do their part. And it's just being able to help them along the way has been really rewarding and really exciting for me. So that's what has been really exciting for me about my role.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. It's great to be here, great to talk to everyone and to connect with the alumni. So in my role, I'm currently working at MSCI ESG Research. I am part of the models and R&D team. So it's largely, I would say, like, you know, the research function of the ESG rating product. My core responsibility is on developing methodologies that are used to measure ESG risks for companies. It's a fun role, mainly because, you know, it's working with a lot of data, which I really enjoy, and at the same time, it's fascinating to work with a lot of information on companies and just to see how the ESG risks affect different companies across the world. It's something what I really like about this role is that, you know, it's ESG and sustainability is like a core part of the company and the core part of the our key offering. So it's pretty good to be pretty good to be right at the core or with a team that's at the core of the ESG offering. In some of my previous roles, we were part of these smaller teams, which is sort of at the I would say, like, you know, which are maybe 2 or 3 person teams, which are working on the reporting and which is on the sidelines, and and right now we're part of the core team working on this ESG data. What's exciting these days is just to see that in the last couple of years, you can see that the ESG has become mainstream, and you're getting a lot more data, and we're seeing that a lot more companies are reporting on a lot more information as compared to like the last decade or so. So that's pretty good to see, a good set of data to work with.
I think you guys have preempted one of the questions I was going to ask you, because we have been in the sustainability world for a number of years. And it seems as though the last 2 years has really had an explosion of interest and even kind of shifting how we're talking, not just about sustainability and business sustainability, but about ESG. And so I'm interested in just getting the perspective from each of you about how this business landscape has changed over these last 2 years. Aaron, I think I'm gonna start with you, kind of because you have that more outward commercial facing business development role. Then maybe Karun, turn to you to talk about the data side, and like how has the quality of data changed in terms of what you are seeing, where you're getting data from, and how you guys are analyzing that data. And Liz, more from the consulting and kind of working directly with the companies, how are companies responding to the changes that we're seeing right now?
Yep. Okay. So again, I've been in the role for like 5.5 years. And when I first joined, I was doing sales, and basically what I was selling were analytics, ESG analytics. So helping companies, again, answer specific business questions around their scope 3 emissions or climate risks, or even helping them with their disclosures, ESG disclosures, etc. And at the time I was based in Chicago and covering, right now I'm based in Europe, but I was based in Chicago and covering the West Coast, which was the most promising market for me. And I would basically arrange a trip to the West Coast and basically cold call every company in the region and try and set up meetings with them. And I think the appetite was there to meet with us and learn like what we were doing, but they weren't like quite ready to like jump ship and say, I want this, right? It was just like let's get to know us, and maybe down the line we might do something. So it was very much a market building exercise, a market development exercise. Not as much business development as we do now, not as much sales. And I think over the last 2 years, for us, what the discussion that we've been having with clients, I think particularly with the corporates, with the issuers and corporate clients, is a significant shift in the reasons why they pursue doing more on ESG. And this could be good reasons or bad reasons, depending on how you see it. But a big piece of it is investor pressure. So more than ever, I think a lot of the companies are doing more because they have investor pressure and peer pressure as well. But a big part is, I guess, the stewardship from the investors, the asset managers, in terms of engaging companies and steering them to doing more, whether it's setting a science-based target, publishing a first-time ESG report, or doing something more advanced around climate. That's the shift I've seen, and it's been tremendous. So like before, again, I would have to go knocking on doors and asking people to meet with me. And now I don't even have the bandwidth to talk to everyone that wants to talk to us, because there's just so much going on.
On my side, or from my view, it's just been a deluge of data that has flown in the last couple of years, and it's a bunch of things that have sort of like culminated into this. I would say like there's, as Aaron has mentioned, there's a lot of investor pressure. Investor pressure is sort of encouraging companies and issuers to sort of like disclose more data. On our, I would say, like the data modeling aspect, I think for many of these issues, we did not have a lot of really good data to make like a good case or to make a good sort of a measurement. In most of the cases, what we were seeing is that, we were using a lot of like proxies and estimates to sort of, for the lack of good data. And we are moving on to using real and actual data, and we are having a good time series of data. And that's something which has significantly changed. And at the same time, like we are having a lot of pressure from the clients to sort of like to get into the weeds of our model. I would say like about 3-4 years back when I started my role, the focus was just on the high level sort of like ESG rating. What is it, like good, bad? Where do you sort of stack up? But then now companies are sort of wants to get into the specifics and what will be the raw data and how it should be seen, how it should be consumed. So I'm also seeing a lot of sophistication from our users, our clients, in terms of like understanding these issues better and like leveraging these data sets a lot better. So I think it's overall been good. At the same time, with the COVID sort of like effect that we had seen in our industry, is that people started wondering like what are these issues like, and what would be the companies, how can companies be viewed from these issues, especially on the social side of things, and how it has affected companies. And that's one side of things, like we can see that the last 2 years you've seen a huge sort of focus on.
So from my perspective, I've really seen kind of what you have both experienced in your positions, but more from the company side on the ground level. And I have worked with a lot of smaller and regional type of companies. And really, Aaron, to your point, 5 years ago, should we do this? Now that has moved into, in the last 2 years, I feel, in smaller companies as well, because I think that investor pressure has pushed so much of the big multinationals to really push up their supply chain, which, Wesleyan, I'm like, yay, finally that's happening. But I do see it becoming much greater interest from leadership in these smaller organizations to focus on ESG and sustainability. Excuse me. The one thing I do say that I think with the smaller organizations is really they're moving beyond environmental compliance and into sustainability, but the social piece is really a bit lagging, I think, at least on the smaller organizations. They're talking about it, but I don't see it as such an effort as I see, with greenhouse gas accounting or that kind of thing. I don't see the DEI efforts being put forth in smaller organizations as I do in the bigger organizations. But other than that, I do think it's been an explosion in the last couple of years, and really from a job search perspective, which I have conducted over the last kind of off and on for the last 6 months or so. Wow, there's a ton of jobs out there, but like 3 years ago, there was like nothing. So I have to say those are some of the changes I've seen in the last couple of years.
And that's a great outlook for the students in the audience here, right? that there are lots of jobs in this space. There are a couple things that you mentioned, right? So we see investor pressure being an important driver for both getting better data to monitor environmental, social, governance performance, and that pressure pushing up through the supply chain to reach small and medium enterprises who are supplying the larger multinational corporations. I feel, though, that over the last 30 years, we have seen cycles of heightened and waning interest in business sustainability, right? So coming off of the financial crisis at the end of 2008, 2009, 2010, there seemed like there was an increase in interest, but then it fell off a bit. And so I'm interested in, from your perspective, will this interest last? And what might be the things that threaten the staying power of ESG, or a new name for business sustainability? And I guess I would just invite whichever one of you would like to take that first, and then invite others to join in.
I'll go first. That's okay. So the question is, will the current kind of surge in ESG, will that last longer term? I think it will, but I think it is going to also evolve as well. So I don't think in 5 years, I don't think it will be the same as it is today, but I do think it will continue to be strong. And the reason why I think it will last compared to other previous searches we might have seen is because there is a lot of capital flowing that is tied to sustainability issues. So we see an emergence of financial instruments, whether it's in the credit markets or equity instruments that are linked to sustainability, corporate performance. So because there is this huge industry now that is growing and that has grown quite a lot over the last few years, I don't see that weaning off anytime soon. I think it is different from other surges I have experienced. Like, for example, towards the beginning of my career, there was a lot on just GRI. Even we were, I think it was GRI 3.1 back then. Then we went into GRI 4.0 and then GRI standards at some point. And that was a huge deal back then. But it was not necessarily driving a lot more disclosure as it is today. And then in 2018, everyone was wondering what was going on with the Sustainable Development Goals. A lot of companies were publishing statements and saying we're aligning to the Sustainable Development Goals. But I think a lot of them were using them as kind of a sort of a greenwashing tool. It's a marketing exercise. There's not a lot of substance underneath that. And we actually did try to come up with a way to put a quantitative approach to make it comparable across companies. And I mean, products were launched, I think, from everywhere, from all directions. And that you don't sort of hear a lot of companies talking about the Sustainable Development Goals anymore. It's more about a lot of the focus is on climate. So where I see the shift is maybe the interconnection between climate and nature. There's a big push right now for how ecosystems and biodiversity, both living ecosystems and also natural resources, are being impacted by companies, not just from a climate perspective, but just overall. And I think we could see new financial instruments tied to biodiversity and ecosystem health and other things in the future. Yeah, so those are just a few thoughts, maybe just for the sake of keeping the discussion going. I'll stop there, but happy to add more to that.
Yeah. What I feel is that the last 30 years you've seen these. It's pretty much the same concept, but then you see different forms of it in different names. And I think the change in name is pretty annoying, because every time we come to a point and be like, okay, it's sustainability, and now it's ESG. Then you see that change, and I think that change is going to continue. I think maybe another 5 years down the line it's going to be something else. And what makes me say that is that there's a lot of specialization within each of those pillars of ESG, that E, S, and G. So there are, like Aaron mentioned, there's a lot of focus right now on climate change and biodiversity. So I think there's going to be a lot more, given the lot of interest from the wider community. You can see that we could further break ESG into to its subcomponents. The other thing that I would think, what I feel is changed, and what motivates me to say that the ESG as concept would continue is that there's regulations which are on the cards. Up until very recently, companies were disclosing largely from a voluntary basis. And there's always this confusion, like, do I disclose through CDP, or this should be GRI, or it should be TCFD? And then you see a lot of other acronyms, and then I remember at one point we used to make a case like, let's see what makes us look better, and that's sort of what we would use to disclose. And right now we see a lot of standardization across these frameworks, and which I think is very interesting, because there's a lot of alignment in what are the frameworks on which a company should actually report, and that is sort of rolling up into government regulations, and which would make it pretty much mandatory for governments, or rather companies, to sort of disclose this information. So I do think these factors would sort of promote ESG as a concept, but then I definitely think this as a name, this might not stick around for long.
So I would agree with both of you. I think that it is going to last, and I think it will evolve, as you both alluded to. I think there's finally enough pressure from consumers and from investors to really give this staying power and really move it, like I said before, up the supply chain to the smaller companies, which is a lot of who I've dealt with. I also feel like, with the global initiatives and country regulations, that's really going to drive some of that. For example, a lot of companies are really putting out conflict mineral statements, and they're really making sure there's not child labor in their supply chains. So I think that piece it is staying, and I don't think I see that changing. The one thing that is a little concerning is if we move into a deep recession, I think that there will be some pullback on efforts. While I don't think they'll go away, I think they'll be tabled for a while. So I think those targets that companies are setting might get pushed further into the future, which has a huge snowball effect for a lot of different things. So that's a little bit concerning, but I do have some hope with some of the new bills that here in the States are that have some interesting may have some interesting effects. For example, there are private companies like Tesla who have, or not private, but large companies that have developed things like electric trucks, or they're in the development stage, but then you've matched it with the infrastructure bill that hopefully we'll see a lot of building out of charging infrastructure, which will allow these trucks to happen, and layer that with incentives to put that kind of infrastructure in places where there's a lot of diesel pollution. And so I think hopefully that matching of those types of efforts will really have great impacts in cities and places like that, but then also for businesses to electrify their fleets, or so those kinds of things give me hope. I do think the current economic state at the moment might pull us back a little bit, but other than that, I'm pretty hopeful that this is going to have a lot of staying power.
Great, thank you for those perspectives. I'm going to turn it to our audience now to get some input on some of the things that you've been hearing. So I'm going to launch another poll, just asking about what are the ESG topics that you find most concerning? Where do you think we need to put more emphasis? What are you concerned about? I'm going to just give another couple seconds here. Most people have responded, but I think we have a clear winner. So let me share these results with you. So I think this reflects the conversation that we've had, that climate is the elephant in the room, right? And that is really driving a lot of the action that we see, right? It's also where we have some of the most reliable data, right, in terms of our carbon accounting. Liz, I think, like you mentioned, the social aspects not being really well covered in ESG or on the radar of smaller companies, and we see that here in these results. So I think, yeah, this is an interesting feedback from our group. And so with that in mind, I would like to ask the three of you, where do you see opportunities for individuals who are entering into the ESG workspace? So our current students who might be graduating in a few months, folks who might be looking to change positions, as several of you have recently done or in the process of doing. Are your teams hiring, right? So we hear that there's this growth in jobs. What are the skills that you would be looking for on your teams, on corporate, on data, on sort of the commercial business development side? What are the skills that we should be equipping ourselves or students with to build out this ESG workforce that can manage climate concerns, right? Manage water and waste, as well as the social and governance ethical issues.
Well,
Go ahead, Liz.
I can go first. So I would think that I think there's a lot of opportunity out there, and just around this conversation around climate right now, I think that's the biggest thing. At least having an understanding of greenhouse gas accounting. What are the levers to lower a company's carbon footprint, to really be thinking about those kinds of efforts around climate. But I would really stress, and what I've seen in the last couple of years in the work that I have done, is that the soft skills are super important. I mean, really just thinking about how do you talk across functions within an organization? Can you get on the same page as the financial people and the operations people, and to really be able to communicate what the efforts, the ESG efforts are in a company and why they're important, and managing that change, because a lot of people, you're going to have champions that are excited to work with you, but then you're going to have people who are like, well, why do we need to do this? This is just adding more time to my job. So really having those soft skills, and I suppose, as much as we all probably didn't love it, getting up in front of the room and doing presentations and working across in groups was really helpful, and really helped me in my position now. And to tell you the truth, I'm too new in this company to tell you if we're going to be hiring, but my goal is to really expand our efforts, and so yeah, hopefully we will need help with that, but yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Yep. I think like in line with the growth that the industry has seen, our team has also grown. We have doubled in size. I think from like about 60-member team, it's grown to like around 120. Also like in the last 2 years. So there's been some rapid expansion that has been going on. We are hiring, and we typically see like about 2 sets of roles. One with similar given our function within the research and sort of data side of things. It's more technical in nature. What we look for, and right now I think it's sort of a policy right now, is that we need to have programming skills, especially around Python, irrespective of what background do you have. We kind of expect a basic Python data analysis skills. It used to be Excel, but then you see that evolution that we've just moved to Python right now. So that's sort of a given that and sort of like a minimum standard that we keep to have like at least a Python analysis skill. Apart from that, we look for any sort of like interest or specialization in any of the E, S, or G issues. And this could be from like an industry's perspective, that you've been working in a sustainability team, and then you have some background, and or you're as part of your research projects, and you're focused on to like the ESG issues in a particular company or an industry. So anything on that area. But then largely we generally very open, and we feel like there's a huge shortage in the market as well.
For us, we are hiring. I think at the moment there are like 60 job openings for ESG globally, but in the US and Europe and Asia Pac as well. So lots of recruiting, and equally, just like Karun said, like we've also experienced like huge growth in our organization. So probably in the last 5 years since I joined, we've grown from about 100 to about 800 people. So quite rapid growth. In the last 2 years, probably like double basically as well. So maybe we were about 400 or so 2 years ago. In terms of skills, I like what Liz said a lot, because I think that is maybe understated. People tend to think like, yeah, I think on paper is good to present like good ESG credentials, and those are, I think, always going to be preferred, I think. Not always, but in many cases, it will be preferred if you have some degree of ESG exposure, whether it's when it comes to reporting or doing carbon accounting or doing something else. But also the soft skill to be able to communicate the value of why you want to do something to someone else. And I can tell you that, because I have a lot of commercial experience, and I've sold projects to a lot of companies. So it's always not just like what are the features or the nitty-gritty details of the project, but it's more like what it's going to do for you and how it's going to help you. And it is not just something we have to do with clients, but also we have to do with colleagues, and it's quite important. And I think in the ESG world nowadays, there are maybe a better defined roles and responsibilities, but a lot of it is still very much, you have to sort of be entrepreneurial and enterprising and be a go-getter and sort of do a lot of things that may not be under your formal job description. So to the degree that you have something that makes you stand out, whether it's, you're a master in Excel or pair presentations or whatever it is, make sure, you bring that to the job and help your colleagues, because you can get yourself forward through that.
Thank you for those perspectives. I would like to turn back to the audience. And Ram, I see you just got off mic.
I'm so proud, as the only former professor, I'm so proud to see. I do recall Aaron, Karun, and Elizabeth. I think all three of them were my students at some point of time. And absolutely, I'm very, very proud of all of your success and wish you all the best. In terms of the subject itself, I would like to make a couple of comments. Number one, with stakeholder primacy taking over the shareholder primacy, with global issues at stake such as human rights or climate change, and investors recognizing the value in terms of ESG, etc., absence of which could cause risks. These three things put together, there's a very, very good possibility that ESG might survive for a very long time to come. Yet, some of you had commented that the change in name that is constantly occurring with sustainability, corporate social responsibility, etc. Yes, even ESG itself, as you might have noticed, has dropped one of the 4 Ps. Somehow it does not seem to incorporate prosperity, which is almost the fundamental reason for which many businesses exist. You have ESG, but prosperity cannot be ignored. Actually, that is why, and I'm sure all of you are aware, the World Economic Forum has kind of really put all 4Ps into it and has been pushing other reporting standards such as GRI or SASB or whichever to make sure all 4Ps are addressed. Something that I would like to bring to your attention. I think do not ignore prosperity, which is also a fundamental reason for all of our growth.
So Ram, thank you so much for that comment. Because we do see, and I guess I'd maybe ask this of the panelists, there has been a push for more integrated reporting, right? So integrating ESG with financial reporting. Are you seeing that in the spaces or that you're working in? Karun, I imagine that because your role is so specialized in ESG data, that you might have an interesting perspective here. Like, are you guys also looking at financial data, or is that kind of like really a separate function? And Aaron and Liz, you know, from your roles, is that integration something that you're seeing?
Yes, perhaps I can just start off. Like I can see that that integration has started off, but then it's only in some of those really large companies that you would see this level of integration that across the board. Financial numbers is something that is, I think it forms the basis of almost any of our modeling or any of our analysis that we do. So then it's also important that we also understand the financial numbers, like as sort of the first step in understanding the company, and then understanding the how the various issues sort of interact with the financial side of things. I could probably just count in my fingers, like the number of companies that are sort of would have the perfect set of the financial and or the most granular sort of ESG sort of reporting along with the financial. And one of the things that when we realized out of that is it takes a lot of effort to build these reports in this level of granularity, and even in that level of sophistication is just sort of we are at that early stage of it. So I would see that maybe down the line, you can see that being mainstream, but then it's always great to see that level of granularity, but then it's I still think it's like early days for it.
In terms of integrated reporting, I think before a lot of companies would just basically slap the financial report and the CSR report together and say it's an integrated report. I think I definitely see more companies trying to do integrated reporting, but I think it is quite challenging. I also think it will. There's a lot of factors that go into it, right? So from one side is to what Professor Ram said is, are you thinking about the impact? Are you going to report on the impact that the company is having on society and the environment? Or are we going to report on the risks that we see from the environment, right? And so do we report EBITDA adjusted values by incorporating climate risk factors? Or do we report revenue at risk, for example, from water stress, which is something that a lot of companies can do, and the tools are out there. So if companies really wanted to, they could do that, but not everyone is doing it, right? Or if they're doing it, they're not disclosing. And then the other angle is, do you report on the total negative impact that the company has on society? Like, do you calculate your footprint and then apply a social cost of carbon and say, this is my total negative value on society? So I think about 10 years ago, I think a lot of companies were doing that. And you can find a lot of those reports, like Puma was doing it. Novo Nordisk, which is a large pharma company in Denmark, they were doing like environmental profit and loss analysis in integrated profit and loss that also incorporates the social. But that sort of fell down from the ESG trendy ideas, and now it's all about I think what a lot of companies are doing is reporting on the climate risk impact. So that is a big trend at the moment. More companies, also the models are better because there is a lot of money in this. So lots of more robust models, lots of better models, all spearheaded by really smart people. I wish it was done more in a more integrated fashion. but I think maybe with time and the right incentives, we will see that.
Amrutha, I see you put a question in the chat. Would you like to ask it?
My question was, what types of ESG data are your investors and stakeholders requesting? Is it just the emission data or the financial performance for your ESG reports? And can this data attract impact investors?
Yeah. Is that question geared for someone specifically or just everyone?
Just, it's a general question. Anybody can.
Okay. Like we commercialize a lot of ESG data. So these are, so I guess like Karun and I work for competing companies, right? From that perspective. And so we both produce lots of databases that are used by the market, whether I guess you're an investor or a bank or even a company. And there is a lot of demand for climate data coming from everywhere. So implied temperature, alignment data sets that help you look at physical risk or exposure to physical climate hazards like wildfires and heat waves, but also things like environmental data at the core, like carbon emissions data. So I think it is a bit of everything, but probably there is a bit more interest for climate data than there is for broad ESG data. Like when I say broad ESG data, I mean like not just environmental issues, but also like details on corporate gendered ratios and pay indicators and human rights issues and all of those things that can also be data-based. That is still growing, but I think maybe a little less faster than climate issues and climate data.
Okay, may I answer a little additional part of this? Thank you so much, Aaron. That was great. The additional part of the answer probably would be, do they attract impact investment, which is cost-based investment was Anmodha's question. Absolutely. If a company is performing better and more focused on a particular cause, you will attract impact investment. Number two, in general, if you have a better ESG performance, you end up being less risky, and therefore your cost of capital really goes down. That also is another way of attracting investments into you. And one final point, which Aaron had made earlier, which I really want to appreciate, how many of you are really aware of greenwashing and the trust related to that? In the trust business, there is something called blockchain technology that is making a very significant change in this entire field. I would love to get some comment from the panel, please.
Karan?
Sure. I regarding the impact investor piece, then it's definitely gathering a lot of attraction. In fact, like if you look at ESG data family, in a way, you can think of it as ESG risks. There's impact data sets, and there's even like Professor Ram mentioned, like related to I think it's called sustainable bonds, and essentially like targeting the lending investors. And essentially, your cost of borrowing is reduced if you adhere to certain standards and if you adhere to certain ESG standards, right? At the same time, you have what was like I think like what is the pioneers that is in the ESG field, that's like screening products. Like if you are, if your business is involved in like let's say alcohol, tobacco, or any of those products, you're sort of like screened out. So across the board, across these different segments, I would say the mainstay is still ESG risk, impact investment, screening. Everything is sort of like increasing, sort of like their the reach like over the many years in terms of screening too. Like we are seeing just interest in terms of like what would be like other new products that can be part of these screens that we call it. In terms of the trust-based concept, like in terms of I think the blockchain, I'm not too aware of it being integrated from into the data side of things. We do rate and analyze like blockchain based companies, but then besides that, we haven't sort of started absorbing these the trust based data sets that I think there were like some concepts in the supply chain where you were able to sort of have such depth into the data, that especially like from like if you are like an agriculture company, you can get into the depths all the way to your maybe like 3-4 layers ahead of your supplier, or even on the downstream side, which I think should and would pick up in going down, especially from a scope 3 emission perspective. Yeah. I hope this helps. Like I just touched upon a lot of things. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Karun. I'd maybe like to, just looking at our time, see if there's another question from the audience, one of the students. See, we have a couple alumni. Avinash, go ahead. You're muted, Avinash.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, everyone, and good morning to the panel too. I joined Illinois this fall to pursue my degree in the environmental management here. So I would just like some suggestions from the panels on what do you like to suggest? What do you want to suggest to the newbies so that they can project themselves in the market and for being industry leaders in the ESG?
Can you repeat the question, Abhinash? Just I couldn't hear you 100%.
I was just asking, what do you suggest for the newbies in this sector so that they can project themselves in the market after 2 years or something to be industry leaders?
So I think we covered some of these in terms of the skills, but were there, and so let me maybe reframe this a little bit, Abhinash. Were there extracurricular things that you all did while you were a student at Illinois Tech that you think helped to position you for roles and more leadership roles? So besides kind of the coursework, like what are those hard skills? Like you talked about, Karun talked about Python and some analytics. You guys talked about soft skills, teamwork, presentation. But what else? So maybe looking on the extracurricular side can help prepare our students for these careers.
Exactly. Thank you, Professor, for reframing.
Yeah, I maybe can offer some recommendations there. So I think, and I also say this with my MBA lens on, because I went back to school after IIT after a few years, and then got another master's degree. So I think what the benefit of being a student is it gives you like a platform, right? So you use the school as your platform, and you basically, the best advice I can give you is to try and network with people from the industry. Just say I'm a student, or just go on LinkedIn and find other graduates from IIT or other EMS graduates, and I am confident that several of them, or many of them, will agree to talk to you. And I think it's not, when I say networking, I don't just mean like have a 30-minute virtual chat or coffee chat and then just kind of leave it there. I mean like stay in touch, right? Like maybe you say, can I reach out to him in 6 months or whatever? But just make sure that that person kind of, is aware of, has you on their radar, basically, if you are interested in their industry or something else. So that's one thing I would recommend. And then the other thing would be like try and maybe form some clubs, or maybe like if there's like an ESG club or ESG finance club, maybe team up with other MBA, other of the master's programs, like the finance program, do some webinars, invite some folks from Chicago or the industry, get some budget from the school to do maybe like a lunch or something, lunch and learn or breakfast briefing. And then that just gives you exposure, right? So I think there's nothing like talking to folks from the industry and talking to people from the industry. doing lunch and learns, doing webinars. That would be my recommendation that would give you the most exposure to the ESG world.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. Do any are any other panelists going to put some light on it? Because I want to ask another question.
Well, so Avinash,
If,
I think we're actually running out of time. We're almost up at 11 o'clock, or the top
okay,
of the
no issues,
hour.
no issues.
And so I would like to take this opportunity. Like, I do see there are a couple of things going on in the chat. So thinking about Myron mentions waste management issues are less significant under the broader topic of ESG, but we do address this somehow in our work on circularity and circular economy. Scott, hi Scott, mentions the proposed SEC rules, of a way of standardizing and making mandatory. And so actually so I organized this panel as part of a course that the students actually demanded, that we have a course focused on ESG. And so I organized the panel to get some industry perspectives from our alumni. But in the next phase of our class, the students are each going to be focusing on different research projects, either more on the corporate reporting side, more on the investing side. There are a couple of folks who are interested in the policy and regulatory side. So folks here will be digging into some of these issues in more detail. But I just want to express my thanks to the panelists, to the students, our alumni, and everyone who attended here today. I think this has been a really rich discussion, and would invite you all to connect with our panelists, Karun, Elizabeth, and Aaron, on LinkedIn, to reach out to them if they found something, you found something that they said was really interesting that you would like to follow up with them. We also have a couple other alumni here in the audience. So Scott, Professor Ram, who's a former professor in the program, Maureen, who else do I see? And I think this provides a platform for us to do some future EMS events. So thanks, Aaron, for mentioning, like thinking about networking. We used to have a very active net impact group that hasn't been as active. And so maybe that's a way for us to get our students engaged in more networking with folks across the city. So with that, I'd like to just wrap up the session today, and thank you all again for being here, and look forward to seeing you all before too long. So take care, have a great day, have a good evening, wherever you are.
Thank you.